So I have to start today's deep dive with something, well, a little unexpected. Dad rules.
Dad rules, like, don't touch the thermostat.
Exactly like that. But specifically, the dad rules of the author we're covering today, Reverend D. Adam Fox. He's got this whole list for his kids. And rule number one is just, it's timeless. Don't panic.
Hmm. That's a pretty solid rule for life, I think, though, I mean, it's usually easier said than done.
Right. But here's the hook. He connects that rule, that one simple rule, to spiritual leadership.
Right.
He says panic thrives in urgency, but spiritual formation. Actually growing in your faith that flourishes in stillness.
Oh, wow.
And if you're a leader who's constantly panicking, just putting out fires and rushing around, you can't actually lead anyone where they need to go.
That's a really profound place to start, and it perfectly sets the stage for the book we're unpacking today, which is Teach Them to Listen, a charismatic approach to spiritual direction and formation.
It is a bit of a mouthful, yeah, but the content inside is just gold. We're diving into this manuscript because it hits on a massive issue.
Mm-hmm.
Burnout. I mean, we all see these leaders, these pastors, even just, helpful friends who feel like total failures because they're exhausted.
Because they think their job is to fix everyone's problems.
Yes.
And that is a guaranteed recipe for burnout.
Mhm.
Fox's whole point, his central premise, is that ministry shouldn't be about fixing. It's not about you, the leader, having the magic answer. It's about helping people hear God's voice for themselves.
And that's really the mission for this deep dive. We're going to explore what Fox calls a charismatic approach to spiritual direction. Now, I know for some people that word charismatic, it might conjure up some pretty wild images, but how's he defining it here?
That's a crucial distinction. He's not talking about hype or a certain style of worship. Not at all. He's talking about the source of power. It's about moving from being a counselor who relies on their own smarts to solve a puzzle to being a partner who relies on the Spirit.
So moving from a monologue to a dialogue.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses this really striking wordplay to describe it. He says we need to learn to listen to the Paraclete, that's the Holy Spirit, rather than becoming a parasite.
A parasite. Wow.
It's aggressive, isn't it?
Yeah, nobody wants to be called a parasite. But let's unpack that. Why that specific comparison, paraclete versus parasite?
Well, just think about the biology for a second. A parasite feeds off a host, right? It drains the host's energy, its vitality, just to sustain itself.
Mm-hmm.
Fox says when leaders try to be the fixer,
The one everyone depends on.
right, the one with all the answers, the relationship becomes, well, parasitic. It drains the life out of the leader, and it actually stunts the follower
Right.
because they never learn to stand on their own.
So if I need you to need me, I'm actually feeding off of you.
You're draining the whole system, precisely.
Yeah.
But the Paraclete, that's totally different. Paraclete is the Greek word for the Holy Spirit. It means helper, advocate, comforter. The Paraclete feeds into the believer. It renews them.
That is such a critical distinction. If I try to be the Holy Spirit for you, I'm just going to drain us both. But if my job is just to introduce you to the Holy Spirit, then I'm connecting you to the actual power source.
Yes. The spiritual director's job isn't to be the Spirit. It's just to clear the way so the person can hear the Spirit. It's more like debris removal than, heavy construction.
Fox uses this great story to illustrate the difference between following rigid rules and actually being led by the Spirit. It's the story of the two priests at the river. Have you heard this one?
Oh, I love this story. It's a classic Zen parable that he adapts.
Hmm.
So you have two priests. They've taken a strict vow of chastity, which means they can't even touch a woman. They get to a river, and there's a woman there struggling to cross.
Right.
Without even hesitating, the older priest just picks her up, carries her across the water, sets her down, and keeps walking.
And the younger priest is just losing his mind.
Oh, he is seething.
Oh.
For hours, they walk in total silence. Finally, the younger one just explodes. He says, "We took a vow. You touched a woman. How could you do that?"
And the older priest says,
He just calmly replies, "I carried her across the river and set her down hours ago, but you are still carrying her." That's the mic drop moment.
It really is. It shows that spiritual direction isn't about, a rigid rule book. It's about discerning the Spirit's leading in the moment. Compassion over legalism. The younger priest was technically right, but he was completely burdened by it.
Speaking of leading and burdens, Fox shares this personal story that's,
Yeah.
well, it's hilarious, but it's also kind of terrifying. He calls it the London elevator story.
Yes. A perfect example of unintentional influence. So he's in London feeling very confident, navigating the tube, gets into a crowded elevator. He's got this giant traveler's backpack on, and he just leans back against the wall to relax.
We all know where this is going.
Oh, yeah. His backpack just mashes the control panel. And the elevator, instead of going up to the street, just plunges back down to the basement. The doors open, everyone groans.
No. And Fox, trying to blend in, he groans along with him like, oh, can you believe this? But there's a woman next to him who saw the whole thing. And she just gives him this raised eyebrow of total judgment.
Busted.
Completely. But the lesson is so profound. Leaders are influencers. Even tiny unintentional actions like leaning on the buttons can shift the trajectory of the entire flock.
That is a scary thought, leaning on the buttons. It means even when we think we're off the clock, our weight, it matters.
It does. We have to be attentive. We can accidentally send people right back down into the basement if we're not paying attention.
So how do we stop? How do we stop panicking, stop leaning on buttons, and actually start to listen? Fox moves into what he calls the praxis of presence, which sounds a little fancy. Break that down.
Praxis just means practice, intentional action. The whole idea is that spiritual formation isn't magic. You don't just wake up one day and you're spiritual. You have to create space for it. It's like building a trellis so the vine has somewhere to actually grow.
And one of the core practices he talks about is meditation.
Right, but not the empty your mind kind of meditation that a lot of people think of.
Oh, no.
No, this is where he gets into the linguistics of it. He goes back to the Hebrew word haga. You find it in Psalm 1. It's often translated as meditate, but it literally means to murmur or growl or mutter.
Growl, like an animal.
Exactly. Like a lion growling over its prey or a dog just gnawing on a bone. It's an active, almost aggressive engagement with the text.
So it's not passive silence, it's chewing on the truth.
It is digestion. You're rehearsing a truth over and over, muttering it until it breaks down and becomes part of you. It's the opposite of zoning out. It's tuning in with real intensity.
Then he kind of swings to the other side of the spectrum with something called apophatic prayer. And he uses this image of the anchor hold. I'd never heard of this, but it is fascinating.
It's deeply historical. So in medieval times, an anchorite would live in a tiny cell that was literally built into the wall of a church. It was called an anchor hold. And it usually had two small windows. One window faced the altar, so facing God, and the other one faced the street, facing the world.
That's such a vivid picture of what a spiritual leader should be.
It is. Fox argues that spiritual directors are like watchmen at the window. We anchor ourselves to stillness so we can hear God amid all the noise. We look at God and we look at the world, but from a place of enclosure. We don't just run out into the street and get lost in the traffic.
That balance seems so hard to hit today. We're usually either hiding from the world or just drowning in it.
Which brings us to a more modern and maybe more controversial practice he suggests. Soaking.
Yeah, soaking. That's a term that definitely came out of the charismatic renewal movements. It sounds a bit passive, honestly.
Is, and that's the point. It's basically just resting in God's presence, usually with some music playing, with absolutely no agenda, no prayer list, no Bible study, just being.
And Fox brings up a biblical basis for this, right? With David and King Saul.
He does. When Saul was tormented by a distressing spirit, David would just play the harp. He didn't preach. He didn't offer 3 steps to wellness. He just played. And the music itself drove the darkness away and brought refreshment. That's the model for soaking, creating an atmosphere where the spirit can just breathe.
But he doesn't shy away from the criticism. He even mentions John MacArthur, who famously called this kind of thing esoteric buzz or just wallowing.
Right. And to be fair, without a solid theological anchor, it can just become emotionalism. But Fox balances that critique. He argues that in our culture, we are so addicted to productivity. We think if we aren't doing something, we aren't being faithful. Soaking is an act of rebellion against that.
Saying, I'm just going to waste time with God because he's worth it.
Exactly. Not because I get a product out of it.
So we have these quiet practices, but then Fox shifts gears into what he calls active and charismatic practices. And this is where it gets really interesting for me because he starts with imagination.
Sanctified imagination. Yeah, this is a big one. A lot of Christians are, they're pretty wary of imagination. They think it's the same as making things up or even deception.
Stop daydreaming and pay attention.
Totally. But Fox argues that imagination is a faculty given by God, just like your intellect. And he brings up C.S. Lewis here.
Who is basically the heavyweight champion of Christian imagination.
He is. Lewis's whole journey from atheism to faith was paved by myth and imagination. He had to imagine a world where the story of Christ could be true, before he could actually believe it was true.
And Fox suggests we use this in prayer.
Yeah, like visualizing yourself inside a biblical story.
Yeah.
Imagine standing next to David as he faces Goliath. Smell the dust, hear the taunts, feel the fear, and then that surge of courage. It engages your emotions, not just your brain.
It shifts the experience from the text to your heart.
Exactly. And while he acknowledges that some critics, like Dave Hunt, see this as dangerous or New Age, Fox leans on Calvin, of all people, to say we just need to submit our imagination to Christ. It needs to be sanctified, not amputated.
Then we get to the topic that usually divides the room. Glossolalia. Speaking in tongues.
Yes. And Fox is very specific here. He's not talking about the public message in a church service. He's focusing on the private prayer language.
And he mentions a study by John P. Kildall that I found really surprising.
It's fascinating because Kildall was actually a critic of the practice. He was a psychologist looking for pathology, for what was wrong. But even in his study, he had to admit that the people who practiced it reported radical changes in their mental health and a much greater sense of peace.
So even the skeptics saw the fruit of it.
Right. Fox explains the benefit as basically bypassing your intellect. You're speaking mysteries to God. It gives your analytical brain, the part of you that worries and plans all day, a break while building up your inner spirit.
It's a way of praying when you run out of English words.
I love that. Sometimes the grief or the joy is just too big for vocabulary.
And speaking of words, let's talk about confession. Because for me, growing up, confession was the booth, the priest, and a list of all the bad things I did that week.
And Fox really wants to redefine that. He goes back to the Greek word homologio. It literally means to speak the same thing.
So it's deeper than just admitting you messed up.
Much deeper. It's about agreeing with God. And yes, that means agreeing with God about our sin. God, you say this is wrong, and I agree with you. But it also means agreeing with God about his promises. God, you say I am forgiven, and I agree with you.
Wow.
You say I'm a new creation, and I agree with you.
That puts a whole new spin on Peter being the rock.
Exactly. Peter wasn't the rock because he was perfect. We know he wasn't. He was the rock because he was the confessor. He was the one who declared, you are the Christ. That confession, that agreement with reality, that's the bedrock of spiritual formation.
Okay, so you've got the role of the director, the quiet practices, the active ones, but now we have to go deep. Segment 4 is called the deep work. And Fox uses a metaphor here that I think everyone can resonate with, even if it makes us a little squeamish. Midwifery.
He references Margaret Gunther here, and it's such a powerful image because it's the exact opposite of the CEO model of leadership. A midwife doesn't create the baby. She doesn't have the baby. She just attends the birth.
And birth is messy. It's painful. It can be dangerous.
And there's a lot of waiting involved. Fox says a spiritual director is a midwife. They're helping the other person birth Christ in you, like Paul says in Galatians. And sometimes that just means sitting with someone while they're in excruciating pain, not trying to fix it, just breathing with them and telling them to push.
Fox talks about a conversation with a monk, Brother Anthony, who coined this amazing term, quickaholic.
Quickaholic spirituality. I think we're all guilty of this. We rush because we are terrified of the silence. We're afraid of the dark chaos inside us. But the monk's point is at the cocoon phase, where it looks like nothing is happening. That's where the real transformation is. If you cut open the cocoon to help the butterfly, you kill it.
That brings up the whole issue of willingness, though. You can't force a birth, and you can't force freedom. Fox tells a story from his time in India that really highlights this resistance.
Yeah, this is a sobering story. He met a woman who was wearing Hindu prayer bracelets. She was in torment, mentally, spiritually, and she wanted deliverance. She wanted the pain to stop. But when Fox asked her to cut the bracelets, which symbolized her attachment to those other gods, she refused.
She wouldn't let go.
She wouldn't let go. She wanted the result without the severance. And the lesson Fox takes from that is, you just can't help someone who is unwilling to be helped. Spiritual direction requires surrender.
And on the flip side of that resistance, he shares these beautiful stories about baptism that show the power of simple obedience. The one that really got me was Holly.
Well, Holly's story is incredibly moving. She was in a nursing home, very frail, in a wheelchair. She wanted to be baptized, but physically, they couldn't immerse her. It just wasn't safe.
So they used a Dixie cup.
A Dixie cup. They just poured a tiny cup of water over her head in the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit. And the result wasn't just, a wet forehead. It was immediate joy. Her health improved, and she actually reconciled with her estranged son not long after.
So it wasn't the amount of water, it was the obedience.
Precisely. And then you have the other story in India, where Fox didn't dunk a girl completely underwater, and the local pastor was not having it.
He shoved her back
He
down.
did. He pushed her back under and said, this is a big deal. But the point is the same in both stories. These physical acts, baptism, communion, they shift the spiritual atmosphere. There are moments where we physically act out our obedience, and the Spirit meets us right there.
This whole deep dive has really been about shifting our perspective. Fox talks about moving from self-consciousness to God consciousness.
That is the ultimate goal, isn't it? When we're self-conscious, we're neurotic. We're obsessed with our own performance, our failures, our image. Am I doing this right? That's the parasite feeding on insecurity. But when we are God-conscious, we're looking at Him. And that's where true freedom is. We forget ourselves because we're so focused on the object of our affection.
He wraps up the book by talking about two Greek words for power. And I think this is a perfect place for us to land: dunamis and exousia. What's the difference, and why does a listener really need to know this?
If you want to do this work, even if it's just being a better friend, you have to distinguish between ability and authority. Dunamis is raw, explosive, miracle power. It's the dynamite. It's the ability to do the work.
And an exousia.
Exousia is authority. It's the right to do the work. It's the badge. It's the jurisdiction. Think of a traffic cop stopping a huge semi-truck. He doesn't have the dunamis, the physical strength to stop that truck, but he has the exousia, the authority of the state. The truck stops because of the badge.
The Great Commission starts with, "All authority has been given to me," and ends with, "Go therefore."
Exactly. We go because we are authorized. And that takes all the pressure off. You don't have to be the genius with all the answers. You don't have to have the strength to fix everyone's life. You just have to be the one who knows who sent you.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Maybe you're feeling burnt out. Maybe you're trying to fix everyone around you. Fox's message is pretty clear. Resign as the general manager of the universe.
That is a great way to put it. Stop trying to be the Holy Spirit for your friends or your family. You are not the paraclete.
Be the midwife. Be the friend in the elevator who just checks the buttons. Be the one who listens.
And remember, spiritual direction isn't about being an expert. It's about being a sacred companion. The most important skill isn't speaking. It's listening.
I want to leave you with this thought. We started with the dad rule of don't panic. But maybe the deep dive rule for this week is don't fix. The next time someone comes to you with a problem, what would happen if instead of offering a solution, you just asked, what do you think God is saying to you in this?
That's a question that changes everything. It puts the ball back in their court and, well, it invites the Spirit into the room.
It really does. Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.